and thank all of you for joining as we begin this journey. So to start our discussion on the seasons of success, let's take a quick look at what the dictionary says the definition of success is. It's simply the accomplishment of an aim or purpose. So, gentlemen, if success is our choice by what we focus our aim or purpose on, do you believe success is defined by the purpose and the beliefs we choose to focus on and plan in our lives? Go ahead, Kent. What do you think?
Well, it's good that you defined success, because I think every individual's definition of success is probably based on something along those lines, but it is a little bit different. For example, you get these sports athletes that are obviously highly successful in what they do. Their definition of success may not be the same as the average Joe's, who wants to be a little bit more well-rounded. So, there's different definitions of success. In business, it tends to be somewhat of a narrower focus. I kind of separate the business from the individual. The world tends to, not unlike sports figures that uses stats, in business, the world tends to define success with stats, different types of stats, but typically numbers, branding, size, and they it's a pretty narrow scope of success. I think there's a conversation that has to happen on some of the other elements of success, lifestyle, community, fulfillment, that type of stuff. But at a quick brush, and it's probably doesn't do justice to the term, but at a quick brush, people tend to think of success in business highly centered around money, which again is a very narrow focus. But it's no different than the hockey player who success is probably defined around some sort of statistic. It's just the way we think.
Yep. Great comment, Kent. I'd like to hear about looking back on your life. What's you're most proud of? Like, you've done so much, including your racing career. But just kind of just think back for a few minutes or for a little while about what you're most proud of. We'll come back to that in a second. But I loved your comment about how you measure success, and reflecting a bit on it. I just heard Alex Rodriguez's interview with somebody, and he was talking about the first part of his life as a professional athlete was all about the home runs, the size of the contract, and that's what he was embroiled in, right? And then he had that big issue with performance-enhancing drugs. And that was a traumatic experience in his life. And he says, that radically changed my life. And he says, now it's all about my family. It's all about the ones I love, my kids, my immediate family, and my close friends. And so my point is that, when we're young, we're probably very highly driven. We don't have any money.
Right.
And so money becomes like, becomes a very important measurement. We don't have a house, we don't have money, and then, so as you kind of, if you're lucky enough and blessed enough to accumulate these things over the years, once you have enough money, you have enough money, and there's maybe other reasons to get up in the morning. But I'd like to hear what you're most proud of. It'd be really cool to hear that.
Yeah, that's, if you would have asked me that question 20 years ago, my answer would be different. So when kids show up, you tend to think about legacy and you want them to do better than what you've done. So I would say one of the things, and it's still early, my kids are in their early 20s, but one of the things I'm most proud of is I could see that potentially all three boys want to be involved in my business. I would be shocked if 2 out of 3, for example, didn't end up being involved in the business and in a major way as a career choice. So the sustainability and the kind of the legacy side of that, and I have 2 partners, and they each have 1 kid that is also involved in the business, and they're actually legitimately contributing to the business. You always worry about, what if your partner's kid, doesn't have us, but it's not that way. So that's kind of cool. So I think one of the things I'm most proud of is we've created a machine, and it appears to be sustainable despite ourselves. I mean, we've created a machine that actually, people appear to know what they're doing, and there's a bit of a sustainability thing. So we're not getting any younger, and my partners and I, when we back out of the business, we can see this thing we created surviving, and I just think that's so cool.
What an accomplishment! What was the secret of them becoming involved in the business and kind of getting a piece of it? I know that you did some pretty special things with your family. For example, if you don't mind, just like you took them to Mexico on a regular basis. I mean, maybe share with our listeners some of the things you did with your family to get them to the point where they're in.
Yeah, no, that's. I mean, we all kind of do the parenting thing a little different, perhaps. But when the kids were quite young, to take them to Mexico for 3 months, and we homeschooled them for a semester. So you get to really, when you're actually teaching each one of your kids, and my wife and I kind of split it up and stuff. You see how they all beat to a different drum, and it's kind of neat to see your kid on how their brain works and how they learn, because they're very different. And that was a great time to with the kids and just hanging out, and we did some really neat stuff. And I would say that's probably a fairly unique experience that we're able to do. We did it for 4 years in a row, which is pretty neat. And I basically just, the first year I never came back once for 4 months, and that was the beginning of the Skype years, and you could actually do this sort of thing in a very rudimentary way. So it allowed, I was able to still be involved in the business, board of director meetings, that sort of stuff. But it was a very special time that I could focus on the family side, which I would say most people probably don't get a chance to do in the middle of their career. I mean, the business at that time was booming. We were growing. It was a pretty ballsy thing to attempt to do. I had great partners that filled in for me. So yeah, it was something that we really enjoyed doing, for sure. Yeah.
I think that what you've just defined is the ideal form of life, that you actually took control and you actually made a decision and developed a process or routine or rituals that actually drove the outcomes that you desired. And this is something Bob and I have talked quite a lot about over the last several episodes, is that our greatest chance of success is to prepare and predict the outcome by creating the process that enables us to become great at something.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because average doesn't do it in today's world. Competition is so high, and that doesn't matter if it's in a very low-key, casual way, just out playing golf with your buddies, if that's in business in the boardroom, trying to negotiate a merger or an acquisition. That applies to almost every circumstance in life. If you have a process to be able to work through a challenge, because that's the minute you set a goal, there's resistance that shows up. So now that process allows you to communicate more effectively and walk things out in any circumstance. What do you think about that, Kent?
No, I think that's very true. I mean, you guys are focusing on some definition of success, and one of the keys to success in business, focusing on that side of things, is your ability to handle the ups and downs. Because when you are actually rolling the dice and putting yourself out there to try and do everything you've got, whether you're trying to make the NHL, or you're trying to start a business and like a sizable business and really make something of it, you're putting yourself out there to fail, basically. But you're also giving yourself the opportunity to succeed, and you will have those ups and downs. And let me tell you, in my experience, I've 31 years. Wow, 31 years. So 1989, I started, and I had no idea. In fact, if somebody would have told me what my journey was going to be like, I'd probably run. And that's it's not for everybody. And the saying, "Be careful what you wish for." Who doesn't want to be so-called, again, that very narrow definition of success? Everybody is probably going to start by putting their hands up. But then if they actually talk to the person on the type of commitment and the almost insane level of dedication, and I would say borderline obsession that one needs to apply to achieve success in life, whether it's business, art, whatever. That's what we're talking about. It is very unusual. In fact, it is not typical of humans wanting to do that. Most people would not want to give up what you have to give up. I remember when I was in my mid 20s, when I was starting my business, I was a typical kid back in the 80s, and all my buddies would go for a beer and they would go to the bar, and I missed most of that. Not all of it, but most. I selectively said, okay, I can do that. But I was highly focused on that. And I look back from my years from 25 to 40, I was focused. I would say most people would say I was unbalanced. I would not fit. My routine would not fit what most people would consider to be a balanced life. I was aware of it. I absolutely did not care because I was focused on building a business, and also, and you guys touch on it in one of your upcoming questions. But there's the fear factor. So fear drove me for 10 years. I loved what I did. I remember my sister once said, "Oh, you work all the time," and I said, "Really? Do I?" And I thought, what an odd question. It's just what I do. And I would have been probably 30 at the time. And it was, to me, my identity at that time, whether right or wrong, my identity was what I was doing. I was in the process of considering getting married, but I was not married. I had no kids. I had, at that point at 30, because I started my business at 25, I had enough money to realize I didn't want to lose it. But if you back it up to when I was 26, 27, I had absolutely nothing. I started my business with zero. I sold my 1971 Corvette for $18,000. That was the only working capital I had. So I didn't care if I lost it. So, as you grow and evolve, you take a much more sophisticated look at risk analysis, of course. But hey, at that point in life, you roll the dice, and you have to be all in. And you have to be completely dedicated, and it's not for everybody. It's be careful what you wish for. It's a lot of people would run, but for me, I was programmed this way, and I actually believe I'm doing what I was supposed to be doing. So yeah, I feel very fortunate.
Did you get some of that drive? Do you think that's a genetic thing partially? Was your mom like that? Was your dad like that? Where did that come from?
So my dad was an electrical engineer, very smart guy. He wasn't business oriented that much. I mean, my mom was probably a little bit more business oriented. She was an accountant, bookkeeper accountant. But no, I came from a very unassuming family, just kind of the average middle class Burnaby boy. Mm-hmm. Don't know. I just.
How young were you? When you really started to understand that you were driven, that you had purpose?
Yeah. So when I was going to SFU, deciding what I wanted to do, my original idea for going to school is my dad told me if I went to university full time, I didn't have to work. So off to school I went. It's not necessarily the most altruistic goal there, but and then of course you get on the conveyor belt and life opens up, and I always loved doing business stuff, and then I decided, what, I'm either going to get an MBA or a chartered accountant, and I kind of liked accounting. That was probably my mom's influence, and I knew it would be a good insurance policy. So I always knew I'd start a business, but I always thought, it'd be nice to have an insurance policy. I just chose that type thing, and the moment I passed my CA exams, I knew I was going to probably leave the firm and start my own business. And at that time, I was thinking real estate. It was the tail end of the Hong Kong transition in the late 80s, which we did not catch. That really wasn't much of the story that we got into. But yeah, I knew I was going to do something. I couldn't see myself just staying 9 to 5. And doing your normal routine. It did not interest me. Average did not interest me. I'd rather fail or be well above average, but I just had this sense that I was not designed to go to the office every day and work for somebody.